Good evening and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French. We are now just 49 days from Election Day, believe it or not, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at all the different scenarios for November 3rd, not just who could win and lose, but more the run-up to that day and also what could be a chaotic aftermath. But we start tonight with new concerns that things could get violent in this country, not only if Trump loses and then tries to delegitimize the election, even calling people to arms, but even a scenario if the president wins. People are concerned because a political appointee at HHS named Michael Caputo saying that that's a possible scenario. Caputo predicts that Trump will win, but he's claiming Biden will refuse to concede. So Caputo told a Facebook audience, and I'm quoting here directly, "When Donald Trump refuses to stand down at the inauguration, the shooting will begin. If you carry guns, buy ammunition, ladies and gentlemen, because it's going to be hard to get." Caputo also accused scientists at the CDC of sedition because they are not supporting the president and they want Joe Biden to win. Late today, he apologized to his boss, HHS Secretary Alex Azar. He also said he's considering a leave of absence to deal with some health problems. But very telling that despite all that, the guy still has a job, and the administration isn't even denouncing him. Take a listen to Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, this morning.
Why does someone who had those views have a job of responsibility like that at HHS?
So obviously he works for the secretary there, Secretary Azar, who's done a very good job throughout this crisis. We have a lot of people who have different opinions on different things, but that's part of what makes this, I think, a successful administration.
Successful to have guys with opinions like this at our health department in the middle of a pandemic. Now, Caputo's call to arms is particularly worrisome because armed militia members have shown up at hundreds of Black Lives Matter demonstrations, including in Kenosha, after police shot Jacob Blake in the back, leaving him paralyzed. Things there, they turned deadly after a 17-year-old, who is a Trump supporter and a militia wannabe, allegedly killed two people with an assault weapon that he brought. The teenager, who's now facing murder charges, spoke with right-wing website The Daily Caller before shots were fired.
People are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously.
But President Trump, who didn't visit with Blake's family when he did visit Kenosha, showed support for the teen gunman.
He was trying to get away from them, I guess, it looks like. I guess he was in very big trouble. He probably would have been killed.
Should be noted, he illegally had the gun. He was not in any way had any legal right to be there. He was from out of state. In addition to all that, killed two people and seriously wounded a third. Now, armed militia members also squared off with police in Lansing, Michigan, you may remember, during those Liberate rallies that the president egged on, protesting against COVID shutdowns and, as I said, movements getting the vocal support of the president against sitting governors' commands. Now, amazingly and fortunately, nobody was killed at any of those demonstrations. Plus, Times also reporting that more and more military veterans are now joining militias, saying thousands of them are now taking up arms here at home after serving abroad. I want to bring in our first guest to discuss, Daryl Johnson. He's a former senior terrorism analyst at the Department of Homeland Security, and he's kind enough to give us a few minutes. And Daryl, when we talk and look at these militia groups, who are they? And I know one size doesn't fit all, apparently, but what do they basically believe?
Yeah, so the militia movement in this country, the modern day, started after two standoffs we had back in the early 90s, and that is Ruby Ridge and Waco. And basically, this was the private citizens, extremists on the far right. This was their rally call and their answer to this government tyranny that they supposedly saw during these two standoffs. Well, during the early 2000s, the militia movement has subsided considerably, and we've only seen a resurgence since the previous administration. When Barack Obama was elected, we started seeing this second wave of militias. And what they are is basically anti-government groups. For the most part, they are defensive in nature, but as we are starting to see, they're becoming more aggressive. They're starting to bring arms to protests and rallies, and they're starting to prepare and anticipate a civil war.
This is the part I'm confused about. There's a lot of it I'm confused about. But if they're anti-government, and as you said, they really hated Obama for whatever reason, what do they find in connection with Trump, particularly all the recent comments that he said smearing veterans, even veterans who gave the ultimate sacrifice? Where's the connectivity to this president?
Well, you can't speak broadly to the militia movement. Each militia is unique. They have different issues that they latch onto. I mean, one issue in particular that transcends all militia groups are Second Amendment rights. Immigration is another issue that pretty much transcends the entire movement. But you do have some movements that are pro-Trump, and there's some that are anti-Trump. There's some that are independent. There's some that are Republican. So you can't just paint a broad brush and say that all militias are the same.
Back in 2009, you started, when you were at DHS, to put this on the radar, that this is something that should be a real concern here. Recently, DHS had another opportunity to, in fact, even not only ring that bell, but also increase the volume. Instead, they even changed the language to minimize it. What was going on there?
My report was basically a warning to state and local law enforcement of the resurgence of anti-government groups on the far right, as well as white supremacist groups. And unfortunately, my warning back in 2009 went unheeded because it became political fodder in a battle between the Republicans who just came off of heavy losses and lost the White House, and using my report as a way to get back at the newly elected Democrats.
But then you fast forward to this year, Daryl, where DHS saw this as a growing concern, including a growing number of veterans coming into the fold potentially, albeit a small percentage of veterans, but still representative in this group. And DHS chose to bury it, or at least leadership did. What did that tell you?
That tells me that this current administration lacks the political resolve to address this problem, which has been growing year after year for the past decade.
Have you seen that these groups seem to be acknowledged or even encouraged by the president? I mentioned that Lansing situation where literally you had guys with AR-15s in front of cops that were just trying to enforce state edicts that were coming down out of the governor of Michigan. I was shocked, thank God, that no guns went off in there, but it seems to be a powder keg ready to explode. How much is this further confused by the president interjecting himself and calling guys like that patriots?
I'll tell you, Richard, I'm, as a 25-year veteran intelligence analyst, am shocked at what I'm seeing unfold this year. And the reason why these groups have continued to grow and recruit and radicalize under a Republican administration is the fact that the president has taken some of their platform issues and put them forth as policy, such as building a border wall along the south without any evidence of terrorists coming across the southern border, banning Muslims from traveling into this country. Basically, these things just play right into these extremist narratives. And he also, like you said, when the Michigan State Capitol was taken over and when they were holding anti-quarantine rallies in other states, he was egging them on his Twitter account by saying, liberate Virginia, liberate Michigan, liberate whatever. And this encourages these groups. And this is the first time in 40 years that I've looked at this issue that I've seen them thrive under a Republican administration.
And, I keep remember Charlottesville, where I saw some of the guys there with the torches, and there's good and decent people on both sides here. People are going to hear what they want to hear out of that. I saw the scene in Kenosha play out, and we talked about that tragedy I hear police chiefs saying, listen, you guys are not law enforcement. No one's inviting you guys in here to be deciding to basically be vigilantes or patrol neighborhoods. But then maybe it was isolated. You tell me. I'm seeing some law enforcement, giving these guys water bottles, thanking them for being on the scene with them. How confused is this when law enforcement rank and file, at least, in certain places, doesn't seem to mind these guys being around?
Yeah, and it is a concern, and it's happening more frequently than it should be. And now what we're seeing, in particular, since 2009, we have actual dedicated anti-government groups that are recruiting military and police, groups such as the Oath Keepers, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, even the Three Percenters Militia has recruited many police officers. And so how can you establish relationships of trust with the community that you serve when you have these extremists in your ranks?
You know, finally, Daryl, when these subjects come up, there's some or even a part of me that says, hey, you know, you're giving oxygen here to a fringe, and you're not legitimizing, but you're giving them a bigger platform than they need. But I just got a bad feeling about this, that if you got somebody with nothing to lose who's claiming that things are being stolen from the people and delegitimizing, as I really fear could happen in the first week of November, even the second week, people are looking, it seems, on these fringes for a reason to go and do some really dangerous things. Am I overhyping this or actually minimizing how dangerous this situation could play out to be?
I think you're right on the mark. I'm saying the same thing. There's other experts who are also sending out a warning. You know, these groups, particularly the white supremacists, have always chatted about a race war. But it's the anti-government groups that are heavily armed that have been kind of inserting themselves into this civil unrest to try to justify this notion that we're on the brink of a civil war. That has me very concerned. And if the Republican Party loses the election, or the election doesn't go the right way, or you know, certain political figures say that the election was rigged or somehow there was voter fraud, that's just going to really play into these extremist paranoia and set them off. And you'll have people that'll carry out acts of violence.
Well, Daryl, I saw the piece that you were quoted in it at length in the Times just last week. It's a fascinating and disturbing read. But Daryl Johnson, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Richard. Thank you.
And up next, we've all heard that phrase, do as I say, not as I do. Well, President Trump taking that to a whole new level, and a dangerous level when it comes to COVID. I'll explain after the break.